is Rachel, and today I will be presenting the research article, The Impact of Plant-Based Dietary Patterns on Cancer-Related Outcomes, a Rapid Review and Meta-Analysis. Cancer impacts millions of people worldwide, though the number of cancer survivors is steadily increasing. Plant-based foods may be an intervention for cancer, and that's what this study is hoping to look at. Plant-based foods like fruits, vegetables, cereals, whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, and other vegetable oils are a main source of fiber and other bioactive compounds. Some of these compounds include fiber as a bioactive, sulfur compounds, carotenoids, polyphenols, and all of these have well-known anti-carcinogenic properties. Though studies on cancer-specific mortality are scarce, and overall cancer mortality studies are largely inconclusive. The study was to synthesize the current evidence regarding cancer mortality, specifically distinguishing between pre-diagnostic and post-diagnostic effects of plant-based dietary patterns on three different outcomes: overall cancer mortality, cancer-specific mortality, and cancer recurrence. This study is a meta-analysis that followed PRISMA guidelines and included 26 articles taken from 1999 to April 20th of 2020 from electronic databases like PubMed. All of the studies included were original human studies and included a variety of intervention studies, cohort, and case control studies. The plant-based dietary patterns that were defined in the studies included vegetarian, vegan, variants of vegetarianism like lacto-ovo-vegetarianism, Mediterranean diet, and other unspecified diets high in fruits, vegetables, legumes, and nuts. They did distinguish between pre- and post-diagnostic studies in this meta-analysis. It included 5 vegetarian diet-like studies, 12 Mediterranean diet-like studies, 2 pro-vegetarian diet studies, and 6 post-diagnostic studies. Again, the primary outcomes included overall cancer mortality, cancer-specific mortality, and cancer recurrence or disease progression. Various studies in this meta-analysis included interventions that were focused on vegetarianism, veganism, and Mediterranean diet intervention, though for the vegetarian and vegan categories, this could range from lacto-ovo-vegetarian to strict veganism. It included any combination of the two, as long as it was a diet focused high in plants and limited or excluded animal products. Studies were also included that focused on the level of adherence to plant-based dietary patterns, and this was used with food frequency questionnaires or other Mediterranean diet assessments that exist. Studies were also included that assessed the plant-based dietary patterns in association with cancer mortality, both before and after a cancer diagnosis were given. Studies looking at the vegetarian diet versus the non-vegetarian diets, there were no statistically significant effects on overall cancer mortality risk, and the only cancer-specific significant results were for pancreatic, lymphatic, and potentially prostate cancer. Relatively small studies, and there was few of them available, and so they failed to support the prevention potential against overall cancer mortality. Of the Mediterranean diet studies, they did reach a statistical significance where those studies that included high adherence to the Mediterranean diet showed a reduced overall cancer mortality risk. Pro-vegetarian diets looked at the variations in vegetarianism and veganism, and those that showed an increased adherence to the pro-vegetarian diet was associated with a lower risk of overall cancer deaths, though this was not significant. Studies that did not include adherence, that just looked at the pro-vegetarian dietary pattern, showed no decrease in cancer mortality. However, one study showed that over the course of 12 years, the change in adherence to a pro-vegetarian diet, only prostate cancer showed a significant decrease in cancer-specific mortality. The 6 post-diagnostic studies, none of them supported the use of a plant-based dietary pattern for cancer risk reduction, whether it was overall or cause-specific. While the post-diagnostic studies were relatively robust and accounted for many different factors, they were largely inconclusive due to the limited number of studies and therefore were not considered significant regarding the plant-based dietary pattern. The overall results of this meta-analysis show that there need to be more studies on plant-based dietary patterns that are well-defined, and the parameters need to be for pre-cancer diagnoses, post-cancer diagnoses, and how a lifetime of plant-based dietary patterns can impact a cancer diagnosis or even survival rates. To extract some of the significant findings from this meta-analysis to demonstrate that more research really is needed. For example, in the vegetarian versus non-vegetarian diet category, there was one pre-diagnostic study that showed that pancreatic cancer and lymphatic cancer mortality risk had a significant inverse association with the vegetarian diet. While the meta-analysis did not demonstrate statistical significance for this category, more studies need to be done. For the different Mediterranean diet studies that were included that examined adherence, cancer mortality risk overall was decreased with high adherence, and this was a common theme among the different pre-diagnostic studies, though specific cancer-related mortality was not statistically significant here. Additionally, some of the post-diagnostic studies showed that the Mediterranean diet significantly reduced cause of all-cause mortality, but not cancer-related mortality. And so more studies really do need to be done to examine the relationships here. Forest plot that was included in the meta-analysis that pooled the data from the Mediterranean studies that looked at high versus low adherence on overall cancer mortality risk. As you can see in this blue box here, that diamond is not approaching the line of null effect, so this does show statistical significance. This meta-analysis had a really strong study design and followed PRISMA guidelines. It had strict inclusion and exclusion guidelines, and some of the studies that were included utilized standard dietary adherence questionnaires like standardized Mediterranean diet or other food frequency questionnaires. It is also the first meta-analysis that aims to study the plant-based dietary patterns and its effect on cancer-related mortality outcomes. Implications may not be towards the design of the meta-analysis itself, but the quality of the studies. For example, the population sizes varied significantly between studies, and there were more Mediterranean studies and less that were strict on the vegetarian guidelines as well. With this comes a misclassification of dietary patterns that was seen in some of the studies. So some of them did not have well-defined definitions of the dietary patterns. And this leads into the variability of the dietary patterns, which would also be a limitation when looking at these specific cancer outcomes. Additionally, there was a lack of accounting for pre-diagnostic state. So this means that it was not determined in many of the studies whether a plant-based dietary pattern was followed for years before a cancer diagnosis or other lifestyle factors that may have contributed to variation in dietary patterns and or into a cancer diagnosis. The authors concluded that there is not enough data, so the true independent effect of the Mediterranean diet with cancer mortality risk is inconclusive based on this meta-analysis. Though there was some significance shown, there's not enough studies. And other plant-based dietary patterns in relation to cancer outcomes have really provided some ambiguous results, with some cancer-specific, some even sex-specific, so some evidence in males versus females was shown, and other things like that. There was a lot of variation. I agree with the author's conclusions. There's really insufficient data at this time for the use of plant-based dietary patterns on cancer outcomes, but the possibility of the Mediterranean diet and its impact should be studied more. All of them should be studied more with well-defined plant-based dietary guidelines, and specifics relating to cancer outcomes and diagnoses would be beneficial. Presentation.